Okay, hello everyone, this is CounterYolo bringing you another video in Star Trek Online. And in today's video, we're going to talk about a couple of starships, as well as some upcoming changes that are about to happen inside of Star Trek Online that, for better or worse, is going to change the game forever. So there's going to be a bunch of stuff in this video. It's kind of like two videos in one. I mean, they released two starships in terms of their stats like back to back, and so I felt it was probably just easier just to make one video instead of two or three. So feel free to see the time links in the description or the time bar at the bottom of the video for those of you that would like to skip around a little bit more throughout the video. And one of the changes is going to be something that I warned in the last video, so we'll get to that towards the end of the video. With that said, when it comes to the starships, the brand new Alliance ship is actually really good. The time frame to earn it is during the anniversary event, which is the 26th of January through the 25th of February. On PC at least, on console, that's still to be determined in terms of the announcement. For the whole progress itself, you need 40 progress points to get the starship. You can earn a maximum of two points per day, or 2 points for 20 hours. So in theory, it should take you about 20 days to earn the starship. You earn 2 points per episode that you play, per TFO that you play, and 1 point per patrol that you play and Omega Stabilization, or at least the patrols and TFOs and episodes that are specific in that list over there to the right. The ones I think are the most noteworthy in terms of probably doing for probably the fastest time. If you're going to play a TFO, Starbase 1 is probably the best one to do. What you can also do, because I've done this a bunch, because I'm more turning into a weekend warrior now in Star Trek Online, because I've just gotten busier and busier. What you can do on the weekend is just play a bunch of episodes, don't turn them in, and basically just turn in one per day. And then when you log in the next day, you can just go in, immediately turn in the episode, and boom, you've got 2 more daily progress points. That's definitely a way to go if you want to do stuff very quickly. You can't hold on TFO stuff because that expires after like a couple of minutes. But episode ones do not go away whenever you log out and log back in. So I recommend if you're going to be a weekend warrior and you're have no time during the week, if you only have a couple minutes, then you could just log in, turn in an episode that you play during the weekend, and still get your 2 points for that particular day. Also, if you want to go super fast, you can just play a couple of the patrols. That's probably absolutely the fastest way. If you have a super high DPS build, that's probably the way to go. You can also just play the Mega Stabilization stuff, and just do that twice per day, and you can also get your points that way as well. That's the classic way of doing it. The difference, of course, is that it used to be that you just played once per day, and you play that once per day. It used to be these play once per day, plus you play the featured episode, and you would be basically good to go. Now it requires a little bit more effort per day, or you just play a TFO or a mission, and you're good to go. It is a little bit different, but the Raider is actually pretty good. So when it comes to new Raider, I mean, it is basically an angled up version of Captain Corrin's old light battlecruiser, except it's a Raider instead of a light battlecruiser and a little bit lower stats, frankly. People on Reddit mentioned that stuff there. In terms of Raiders themselves, keep in mind Federation Raiders are called light escorts. Klingon Raiders are called birds of prey. Romulan Warbirds do not have any Raider flanking, so they actually technically don't have any Raiders inside the game. And basically all of the non-faction specific stuff like General Vanguard or anybody else, they're just called Raiders. So in terms of that general subclass, those are the base stats there for what the averages is, as well as versus the average versus all of the other tactical starships combined. When it comes down to it, Raiders are extremely maneuverable, but extremely not durable at all. They also they have 1 less weapon because they have Raider flanking. Basically, if you can get the Raider flanking on enemies, they'll do the same damage as regular 8-weapon starships. Otherwise, they'll do a bit less. The other advantage for them is that they get mostly universal seating. If they have commander universal, they are down in Ensign Bridge Offshore Building, or they might still have the same amount of seats, but they'll they'll be down 1 a building in total in some fashion. Romulan Republic Warbirds do not get Raider flanking. Instead, their ships get an enhanced battle cloak in compensation for that. In terms of the mastery package, it is almost one of the most offensive mastery packages in the game. The downside is that you just don't have crit chance. Destroyers and warships have extra 2.5% accuracy instead of the defense here, but otherwise it's basically the most offensive magic package you could possibly get in a Starship. And considering that it's one of the best magic packages available from a Starship, plus you've got mostly universal seating in a Raider, they are some of the best ships to use, especially if you want to try lots of different variations on your different types of DPS builds. Keep in mind, Raiders, because their stats are really low, you should not be tanking in Raiders. You should be using other ships instead if you actually want to tank. But because the vast majority of captains, are DPS captains, this is going to be generally a really good Starship. And because this ship is Lieutenant Commander Command, it's also going to be a good torque mode as well. In terms of the base stats here, as you can see, it actually has a smidge of higher hull and shields versus the average for Raiders, but it's got a smidge of less turning and impulse. So what it basically comes down to is, look, you've got a battle cloak, you've got Raider flanking, 5 tactical consoles base, and when you give it tier 6X, you've got 6 tactical consoles. Commander tactical. Basically, like, if what you're looking for is basically just a good Raider, and you don't really care about it being super fast or needing the exact specific specialization seating, this Raider is going to be perfectly fine for the vast majority of you that are doing DPS builds. And even if you're like, oh, this is not quite as durable, if you have a good tank on your team, it's totally fine, and you don't need extreme durability. Now, yes, there is Tyler's duality that gives you more crit if you have higher hulls, so there is that consideration to be made. But besides that, this is a perfectly fine ship, and the trade console and experimental weapon with this ship, they're probably not going to be the top tier things, but especially if this is one of your first tier 6 starships that's one on the lower durability side of things, those things are going to help. They're basically going to help you intuitively teach you how to basically stay alive in a more squishy starship. And so I am very impressed with the way that this new ship, as well as the stuff around the ship, is kind of formed around it. So I am super happy with it. Also keep in mind, a lot of the Raiders in the game are older. And so they only have 4 weapons in the front, or they're from the fleet and they only have 4. So it's going to have some advantages versus a lot of the older ships in the game, frankly. The Fleet Burrow only has 4 weapons in the front, but it's got an enhanced battle cloak and Raider flanking, which is very unique for it. And because it's Commander Universal, it loses 1 bridge officer building. The pilot bird of prey from the fleet, which will be accessible to everyone on Tuesday once you get a Klingon captain to level 65. It's a bit faster, but again, it's a 4-2 level instead of 5-1. So there is definitely that in terms of to be made. I forgot. Yeah, anyway. It should be Commander Tactical Pilot, by the way. I forgot to mention that there. The promo Tillis and Legendary Tillis, obviously they're the Romulan versions of the birds of prey. They're both nice in their own ways. For a torp boat, the Legendary Tillis is the better way to go, though. It's got an enhanced battle cloak, so you can fire from cloak for your torpedoes. But it's down 1 tactical console versus the New Alliance Raider. So there is definitely that to be made too. In terms of other Alliance Raiders, we have the Gemini Vanguard Raider, we have the 31st Century Temporal Raider, and we have the new and we have our current Alliance Raider. And each one of these have different specialization seating, which I think is also another reason as to why the new Alliance Raider is command, because we already have a Temporal Raider and we already have a Pilot Raider. So why not add a different specialization alongside them? So I'm definitely a fan of what they've been doing. Again, I'm really impressed about this new Starship. If you want a Picard Raider, there's your 2 options. The Miradorn is from the Picard bundle in the C-Store. The La Serena from the new Picard TV show is from promo packs. They're both extremely similar in terms of what they do. If you really want double commander seating, the Serena is a bit better. Otherwise, the Miradorn is perfectly fine instead. And that Miradorn is a count unlock if you get it through the Picard bundle. My 2 favorite Raiders is the Maquis Raider, because you get 7 tactical consoles. And Commander Raider Worker, Kelvin D4X is the, I probably say the ultimate maneuverability Raider inside the game. Battle Cloak, Raider flanking pilot abilities, all that jazz. It's really nice to have for that ship, frankly. When it comes to frigates, big thing to note for you all especially is the a Lachi frigate we earned like a year and a half ago. I think it's the same base hull and shield ratio as the Temer class. So it's really nice to see that. So if you have the Lachi frigates and have flown it before, it's basically a bit more maneuverable, but it's just as squishy as that ship. So there's that to know about. The promo Freedom class is quite a bit more durable though. So there's that to be made too. Again, the console trait experimental weapon, it's really about teaching you how to survive with a raider, especially a raider with torpedoes and mines, which a lot of times have a lot of AoE kickback and damage that whenever they hit targets, and so there generally is some advantageous stuff to staying away from the targets that you're firing whenever you're using a torpedo / mine boat. Whenever you're playing Star Trek Online, the console gives you a short duration bonus damage and shield pen, with the second part that you can activate anytime within a minute of it activating, which gives you a very significant boost to speed and turn and damage resistance. So if for some reason you wandered close to an enemy and you're trying to get away from them, you can in time, you still have a lot of damage resistance to survive an AoE explosion, frankly. And I think that's really nice. Again, I don't think this is going to be extremely high meta types of things, because I mean it's only going to be a couple seconds for that duration of bonus damage. Sure, it gives you some AP damage and crit severity, but I still don't think it's going to be a high-end console, frankly. The Starship trait Sniper gives you bonus damage from being farther away from targets. It feels more like a space trait instead of Starship trait, but I mean, again, if you're a newer player, you don't have a bunch of super strong Starship traits, it's a perfectly fine filler torpedo Starship trait while you're going to get the better stuff out there. The experimental weapon, again, it's another one of those, hey, if you're trying to standardize with a sniper trait, use the experimental weapon, and it helps make sure that enemies stay away from you, so you can capitalize more on more bonus damage from your Starship trait. I think it's perfectly fine. There are better experimental weapons for sure that are going to be out there. It's definitely fine for a newer player. In terms of the Lockbox stuff, I'm obviously not as excited about the new Warbird. I mean, there is obviously some blog errors, like for instance, it says the grand prize is this ship, and yet right at the very beginning of the actual description of the new ship, and I just checked today, and it's the same, that it's the Lloyd Crystal Consortium is pleased to announce that it's acquired a new starship, and it's from the Picard Lootbox. So technically, from these sources, it's either in the Lootbox store, or it's in Lockbox, or it's in both. So I mean, yes, there's lots of blog things that happen all the time in this game. So I'm just going to assume that it's from just the loot box and not from the Lootbox store. When it comes to Strike Wing escorts, normally in this game, there's the overall normal stats versus the average escorts. If you look at my old Starship Classes Re-Explained video and look at what normal escorts have in terms of their actual maneuverability, normally they're super fast in terms of turning and impulse and inertia. And Strike Wing escorts are basically just the average ship. So like they lose a lot of maneuverability to get that higher ratio and that hangar bay. And so yeah, there is that big con of maneuverability to get that hangar bay. So yes, and if you want to look at this ship versus the average, this is basically an average statted Strike Wing escort that happens to have a commander spec it's the first full spec Strike Wing escort inside the game, except it's a Warbird, and it's got a battle cloak and no forced science seating. That's really it. Like in terms of in the grand scheme of things, in my opinion, this doesn't really seem super impressive to me. Really, the biggest thing going for this ship is the new hangar pets from it. And we'll talk about that more when we talk about the new Zot Vaj disruptors later on inside the video. And Tier 6X gives that too. First, and I'll go first through some torpedo warbirds, and I'll go through all the Strike Wing escorts because there's not a ton of Strike Wing escorts inside the game. So, of course, for torpedo ships, we can't ignore the Talus or the Scimitar. They're both, in my opinion, probably the first starships that most people think of when they think about torpedo boats inside the game. The Talus is is it's got a built-in enhanced battle cloak, extremely maneuverable, but no hangar bay. And it's got the intel bullets, but I forgot to list that. The Scimitar gets a hangar bay, it gets access to the flagship set, and if you're willing to sacrifice a console slot, you can fire from cloak as well, and you can fire all weapons, not just torpedoes, but all weapons from cloak. So that is an advantage that it does get. And the other thing I thought of with this new ship was that basically, I know people have been memeing and wanting a pilot Scimitar for a long time. If you actually look at the base stats here between the tier 6 Scimitar versus the new Strike Wing Warbird, basically what you're looking at is a ship that has a bit less hull and shields, but quite a bit more maneuverability in terms of turning, impulse, and inertia versus the Scimitar. Basically, if what you were wanting is basically just a more maneuverable Scimitar and are willing to have it just for one character, that's one of the other niches for this new ship. If that is what you're wanting, this ship is a decent alternative to these Scimitar. Of course, I mean, if you're trying to do this on a brand new character, you're going to have to buy an Atlas because the DPRM is not available to people too much anymore. Another big thing I'll talk about later. In terms of other torpedo ships, the Hoppax, however you say that, it's basically the fleet version of the Scimitar, except it's Commander Engineering, and one less tactical console available to you, but in 4.4, but it does similar things. So, downside to the ship is that it's tier 5 military, it's tier 4 military equivalent, doesn't allow you to have torpedo spread 3 and contract firepower 3, so that really sucks with this particular ship right here, but it is a slightly more accessible version. In terms of what other people think of as well when they think of torpedo boats for Warbirds, the Vostom is one of the best looking Romulan ships inside the game. A bit lower in terms of its stats than some of the other ships for Commander Engineering, but I mean, it is a full spec Warbird, so it definitely does get that. And torpedo boats don't need 5 weapons in the front. It's nice to have 5 weapons in the front, but it's not needed for torpedo boats to have 5 weapons in the front. So I don't really think it's the end of the world if this ship doesn't have 5 weapons in the front. You can still do a lot of the same things on this ship over here that you can do with the Vostom. And of course, the Suliban Silic has got 2 hangar bays. The ship does not have a singularity core, and so it is Commander Engineering, so it does get defensive cruiser commands, which is nice. I think this is better as a tank than a torpedo platform, but it still works decently for a torpedo platform as well. You still get a full Romulan battle cloak with cruiser commands, which is very unique inside of the game. For some silver designs, I wanted to put the Veteran Destroyer in the list too, so I'm just having it here. It's really that the original pilot escorts and pilot warbirds have, at least in my mind, I might be the only one here, but I seem to get some of the similar motifs of these ships to what the new Strike Wing Warbird actually is. Like when I initially saw this Starship when I was binge watching Picard, I was like, huh, that reminds me of the pilot warbirds. And I might be the only one, but I don't think I am. It's definitely not in terms of like mechanics in the game, but at least from the visual motif, it seems similar. Now, when we get to Strike Wing escorts, keep in mind, Cryptic has not been very consistent about the naming of this class. Originally, when this class was initially added to the game, in some places they were called escort carriers, which made people confused because other carriers in the game only had, or most carriers in the game have 2 hangar bays, and these escort carriers only have 1 hangar bay. And so it would cause confusion. Like even when I was describing different classes inside the game, a lot of times when people were asking about carriers, they were talking about escort carriers. And I was like, well, in my mind, when I talk about carriers, I talk about 2 hangar carriers. And it's why it's consistent when I've talked about carriers normally. I normally specify by saying 2 hangar carriers because of this confusion that has happened in the game so much. Now, in Cryptic's infinite wisdom, they decided to rename some of the escort carriers to Strike Wing Escorts and Strike Wing, well, this new ship is Strike Wing Warbird now. Except they didn't rename all of the ships in the game. They decided to keep the Archive as a tactical carrier warbird, and they decided to keep the Kin as a flight deck Raptor. I don't get why those ships didn't need to be renamed when like the rest of them were. I am still really confused by that. Maybe there's something I'm overlooking in terms of why those ships why those ships couldn't be renamed. But I just don't understand. I mean, like when you look at some of the other ships, like the Fleet Sec is a Strike Wing Escort instead of Flight Deck Raptor. So I don't know. I am really confused on that, frankly. But anyway, and even like the new dock Starships over here that Cryptic made recently, I think it was like a few months ago, the Alita, which is the Caesar version of the Akira, by the way, they still called it an escort carrier here. I don't get why they keep on going back to escort carrier when they talk about different Starship subclasses. I don't understand. Maybe I'm one of the few people that really gets nitpicky about different Starship naming conventions inside this game. But I mean, if Cryptic is going to rename a Starship subclass as something, I think you should rename everything in the game that falls into that subclass as that new naming convention. That's just me. I think that'll make it easier for people. I mean, yeah. The one nice thing about this Strike Wing Escort versus the other two variants here, these are the Klingon and rounded variants of the Akira, by the way. All these variants have different bridge offer seating and console layouts, which is again akin and a callback to, or I think actually Flag just came after these. Anyway, these remind me a bit of like the flagships, for instance, that the flagships all had different bridge offer layouts versus their other faction variants. And so it's nice to see that we actually still have some other place in the game where the different faction variants actually had different seating. So if now that as captains we can access all three of these, you can actually look at all three bridge offer seating and be like, which one of these seatings would I prefer to have if I was going to fly one of these three things? Now, granted, in Modern still, because all these are only 4 weapons at the front, 3 in the rear instead of 5-2, they're largely ignored and not flown anymore. But I really hope that future starships that are like bundled starships with multiple of a similar type of starship, all released at least at once. I hope they follow this motif in the future of that each different faction has a different bridge offer seating configuration. But maybe that's just a wish by me. When it comes to fleet, obviously the Fleet Sec is probably your best alternative, frankly. It is a Strike Wing Escort, it is a 5-2, and it's got a Lieutenant Commander command. So if you want a cheaper fleet option, the Fleet Sec is the way to go. It's got a battle cloak just like the Strike Wing Warbird. And on Tuesday, once you get a Klingon character to 65, the Fleet Sec will be available to all of your captains, not just the Klingon captains. So it is an option for you. We have the Lockbox Herc and Lockbox Zindi. They're fine. I think they're slightly outdated in Modern Stow. The Lockbox Herc, if you really want to fly that, you can. It is an interesting starship. Extremely tactical heavy. But, you know, you can do whatever you want on it. The mirror angle, I don't know if the mirror angle got fixed in terms of its whether it can be upgraded to tier 6X yet, but that's what it should be once it's at tier 6X. Fleet angle, obviously it is completely inferior to the Fleet Sec, so you should not be flying that ship anymore. You should be flying the Fleet Sec instead. Just saying, unless you're going for Space Barbie, you shouldn't be flying the Fleet angle anymore. Cool. All right. Now for the trading console on this new ship, well, actually, we'll talk about the SF first. It's a ranged weapon. It's a physical damage DLT weapon. Whip-de-doo, we've got a bazillion of those in the game. It also does a damage distance debuff to enemies. If that's really powerful, then it's good. We'll have to look at the stats to see it. It doesn't sound interesting at all. The new hangar pets are going to make or break this entire ship, frankly. It's a new fighter squadron, which of course, when you were going to get more fighter squadrons in the game, it's basically just it's just another vehicle for the new disruptor weapons. We'll talk about them in a bit, but basically, here's the various things for the fighter squadrons. Like if you go back to that support carrier stuff, White means that it's available to all ranks here. Blue means it's available at in the lithium store or at the fleet. You get that in both of those. Yellow is only available if you get the fleet variant of the fighter squadron. So if you actually look at this, normally when it comes down to it, abilities don't matter too much in the grand scheme of things between the various ranks, unless you get Scatter Volley or Fire Will at like a higher rank. This one's available to all ranks for Scatter Volley, so whoop-de-doo. What the big things for this fire squadron is, first off, it's got Cannon Scatter Volley built into its thing at rank 1, which means superior area denial isn't going to matter too much for these hangar pets, frankly. So that's something to think about. And also, its upgrade at the dilithium store rank just gives you torpedo high yield, which isn't at the grand scheme is going to be too much, frankly. The big thing is going to be fleet, which gives you an extra set of disruptor dual cannons. So basically, with these fighter squadrons, stick to either the standard one from the ship if you're going to get the ship, or go to the fleet version. Don't worry about the dilithium store version. The dilithium store one is basically going to be not consequential at all, frankly. Cool. And basically, like, the big things about these things is that they're just a new vehicle for the disruptor weapons. The console, it's a plasma damage console on a ship that's accentuating having a team of players that are going to be using disruptor weapons. So I don't see the point of having a console that gives you extra plasma damage. I think it should have been extra disruptor damage. But that's just me. Maybe it's super high crit chance or something really silly, and so that the crit chance trumps everything else, maybe. I don't know. The active, it's like, if it's high damage, it's good, and otherwise, we're not going to worry about it. The Starship trait, command singularities, command abilities, as well as singularity abilities. Summon a micro singularity either at your target or 5 kilometers in front of you if you don't have a target. This sounds similar to a certain torpedo trait from the Lootbox store, which is decent on torp builds, and it's really nice on EPG based torp builds. And so it sounds like that, but 2.0 and via a lockbox instead of the Lootbox store. Except the problem that I see with this is this should be like godly for science warbirds that have command abilities, which is a problem because we don't have any science vessels in the game right now that have a singularity core, a secondary deflector, and command abilities. We have lots of starships that have 2 of those 3 things, but not all 3. So that's a problem. Now, when it comes to Romulan science vessels, we have, of course, the Dyson science destroyers, which really suck between the variants because they all have the exact same bridge offer between the 3 variants, and it's just console differences and cosmetic differences, which in the grand scheme of things doesn't matter too much because most science vessels just do mostly clickies anyway in modern stows, so that doesn't matter either. You've got the multi-mission science vessels from the Sea Store that are called Explorer Warbirds that are temporal. You've got the Leosa, which is the Romulan version of the Sutherland class. You've got the Fleet Hanon, which requires tier 5 military, so you never see this ship ever. And that's it for actual Romulan starships. There is a Sui More that people talk about a lot, but that ship doesn't have a singularity core. It has a regular warp core, so that ship sucks, at least when it comes to this particular trait. So that's a problem. Every single Romulan science vessel only has temporal abilities. And yeah, in case you're wondering, like, the Klingon ships are basically the exact same in terms of choices. The Klingon ships is basically the same. Klingon ships have their version of the science destroyers, their version of the multi-mission science vessels. They have their Nagasov, which is their version of the Sutherland, and that's it for them. So, yeah. Factions that aren't the Federation don't have very many science vessel options, which, with the new changes about to happen, which is, I guess, is nice. Non-Federation captains get access to all the Federation science vessels, but it'd be nice that if you get actually unique non-Federation science vessels too. When it comes to other lockbox stuff in general, the the space and ground trait and standalone Starship trait don't really seem too exciting, frankly. Abundance of caution and choose to deliver basically the same thing in space and ground combat. It's a blockade that once you do a little bit of damage to enemies, it's a pretty significant damage resistance debuff to them. It's going to be a situational one. Blue Skies is a PvP only trait. Zosvash Venom. Well, there are a lot of traits that has a chance to do a DOT around you. Most of them, frankly, suck inside of Stowe, or they were good and then they were nerfed to the ground. I do not expect much from that trait at all. The standalone Starship trait, one impossible thing at a time, is basically Intelligent Agent Attaché, but in your Starship traits instead of space traits, and you don't need to crit to get that reduction. So, the problem with this trait is you would need to have a person in a situation that they have a really low crit build, but they're really wealthy and can somehow afford this trait, but not Intelligent Agent Attaché and ability to get their build up to high crit, which I don't realistically see in Star Trek Online. If you can afford to get the newest stuff, you probably can at least copy someone who has a decent build and have a good build to have Intelligent Agent Attaché work. So it seems like a worthless trait to me. Unless there's something that I'm missing on that trait altogether. When it comes to kit modules, Talshar Forensic Standard sounds like dampening field from Science, but it's available to everyone, and it's in a kit module instead of a captain ability. And whenever enemies die in it, it's basically combat supply power-ups that pop out that you can run over and get extra stuff. Molecular solvent canisters. You use it and it's an AoE explosion that debuffs enemies. Could be good, could be meh, depends upon stats. The personalized special trajector. It's basically the enhanced initial damper field. That's from one of the Herodian starships. I can't remember which starship, but it's basically the ground version of that. It's got 3 charges that recharges every few seconds, and it's a teleport ability that you teleport in front of you, like a couple of meters. Basically, what I see with this is basically the, do I want to break TFOs and ground missions? This is probably one of the best ways to do so. Like, if you're someone who wants to basically make a meme-based captain with the new with like a new KDF captain you're going to make in the next couple days, I would suggest getting the cat species for KDF and creating a captain and getting this kit module plus this spatial full space transporter from the exchange as well. And then now you'd have 2 transporter abilities in your kit modules plus a captain that can jump really high. And you can probably break stuff inside of Star Trek Online with that combination of stuff. I'm trying to decide whether I want to do that with my new captain or if I'm going to do something else that's also equally memey inside of the game. I'm trying to decide which way I want to go personally, but that is one of the things that I am considering right now. But anyway, when it comes to stuff from the Lootbox store, we have a new armor, which of course is to give us more ground Barbie options. It's a melee armor with a disengage ability. It's basically the opposite of the Zenkethi armor. And the Zenkethi armor had an extra ability which allowed you to engage against enemies. This one's a disengage ability. I see this, when combined with the other stuff in the armor, I see this as basically probably the melee armor of choice for Into the Hive Elite. In that map, you basically the most annoying thing for melee DPS is that a lot of the Borg like constantly spawn like this AoE plasma stuff that like it takes a little bit to charge, and then if you're in the area when it fully charges up, then it kills you. So it's kind of annoying whenever you immediately start attacking an enemy and they start charging that. Like normally, well, you'd have to immediately like actually manually disengage. With this armor, now I would have the opportunity to just attack a little bit longer, and then at the last second use the disengage ability and like leap back, which in my mind just sounds really exciting. and a nice alternative to other options that I've done before and into the Hive Elite. Maybe one of the only people that like play this a super ton, versus maybe some of you that watch this channel. But I don't know. I like to play around with some of that, and this just sounds exciting to me. The Zotvash Disruptor Pistol basically sounds like the Romulan Plasma Repeater Pistol, but just 2.0 and via the Lullaby Store. Basically, it's kind of like the same thing, except it's single target repeating ability and as its secondary ability. If you fully do it 6 seconds, it finishes off with an AoE damage ability too. So it's basically a strong single target pistol that basically whenever you finish that single target thing for 6 seconds, if you're like shooting it at like a big boss or something, it does AoE damage against all like the minions around it. So I think that's interesting. I don't know if this is necessarily going to be like super meta or anything, but it at least sounds interesting. And so it's got some neat visuals too, and I think that's why most people are probably going to get this thing is for the visuals and not necessarily for the the actual DPS meta in terms of ground. It's up to you. Now, obviously, when it comes to space combat, these Zotvash Disruptor weapons are one of the things people are talking about. It's basically Coalition Disruptors 2.0. And instead of a chance for a debuff on a target, it's just a guaranteed, it starts adding these extra stacks of the Zotvash thing on enemies. The more stacks there are on an enemy, the more damage your next shot's going to do. And so if you have a full team of 5 all applying stacks, and maybe everyone has hanger pets that are of these Zotvash hanger pets also applying stacks to enemies. That might not necessarily be doing as much damage, but they're applying extra stacks. So your shots are doing more and more and more damage, and our damage is going to continuously ramp up more and more and more and more and more. My guess is that Cryptic is probably going to release these disruptors, and they're probably going to start out objectively OP at the beginning. Then after a couple months or weeks or whatever, they'll be nerfed to the ground to the point that you have to have a group of 5, all with Zotvash pets, for it to be as good as other weapons inside the game. That is my guess right now. I could definitely be wrong, but that is definitely my guess right now. The most interesting thing in the loot boxes right now, though, besides the ground kit module transport thing, which sounds fun, is the impossibility device. It is something that's basically going to be guaranteed to be in every single loot box, and it's a consumable tanking device that gives you extra max HP as well as extra healing. And it's not like passive precursors. This is your active healing that you're doing. It lasts 30 minutes and it stacks up to 10 times. Other big thing too is that it's not removed whenever you are defeated or whenever you change maps. Keep in mind as well, the impossibility device buffs your space and ground stuff. So this also means that your timer for 30 minutes is going to start counting down whenever you're waiting inside of like ground social zones too. So if you're wanting to get the maximum amount of your impossibility device, and all you're going to be doing is playing ISC, you basically have to play ISC, and then the moment that you finish ISC, you have to log out of your character and go to another character and wait your 30 minutes, and then go back to that character and immediately go into ISC again, because otherwise this is probably going to time out in your ground social area while you're waiting for ISC to pop back up again, because TFOs have a 30-minute cooldown. It's not like other buffs in space where it's like, hey, I can basically just chill and ground and wait for it to pop up again and I can do it again. That is a downside you're going to have to think about. So that could be good or bad, because otherwise you have to use, to get the maximum out of this, you have to use 10 consumable devices of these between you or your allies. They're setting them on you as well every single time that you're queuing up for ISC or HSC. Now, yes, the other big thing of this was that you're basically trying to remove debuffs on your allies that happen to have injuries. That's not what I really see this being used for, frankly. I see it as the extra max HP, extra active healing. Because look, realistically, if you have allies that have lots of injuries on their character, me being realistic here, they probably don't know a ton about the game. They probably don't realize that maybe even still have injuries, or they're too lazy to deal with it, which means they're probably okay with not doing as well in the TFO, or okay, not having as great of a build. So even if you do take out the injuries, they probably still aren't going to contribute quite as much to the mission. Just going to throw that out there for y'all to think about. All right, so finally for TLDR here, the Event Alliance Raider is amazing. It's going to be a great Raider platform for players. The trade console experimental weapon, I don't think they're going to be top tier, but they are good for teaching newer players how to play Raiders properly, like keeping them away from enemies that are blowing up, and those other things too, and a console to allow them to move out of the way of an explosion if needed. I think that's fully great. The Lockbox Strike Wing Warbird is the first full spec Strike Wing escort available in the game. I see it as a very situational starship. Only if you're wanting a Strike Wing escort specifically that doesn't have a forest science seat, maybe it's okay. If you want basically the rough stats of the tier 6 scimitar, but have it be much more maneuverable, that's another option. Otherwise, it's hard for me to justify wanting that particular ship over just something else. Again, the trait seems to be more in line for a command science warbird, which those don't exist in Star Trek Online right now. So maybe that's a hint that Cryptic is going to be making a new command science warbird in the future. Maybe, I don't know. The console is weird because it enhances plasma damage, but the whole thing with the new loot box is around disruptor damage, so maybe that plasma damage thing was just wrong in terms of its description. The experimental weapon we're going to have to see on its stats, it's really a squadron pets, and it's around the new Zot Vosh the disruptors, which is basically collision disruptors 2.0. Basically, if you have a whole team of collision disruptor or a whole team of Zot Vosh disruptor players with the Zot Vosh squadron pets, is probably going to be good. I'm guessing it's going to be nerfed to the point that you have to have a full team for it to be better than other energy types inside the game. For game-wide changes, we have the new Lockbox device, which is a consumable strong device for tank players. I'm guessing they're going to be really cheap on the exchange because there's not going to be a ton of tank players that will be realizing this off the top, but it's going to be good. Even if it's just like 1% max HP per stack, that's still 10% max HP, which is still nice. The KDF Recruitment Event, big things from it is that there's going to be a new trading console. I didn't happen to see details on the new trading console. They might be good, they might be okay. I mean, it's going to be a free trading console, so it's going to be whatever. The big thing from it is that you can earn endeavor points faster whenever you complete the recruitment thing, which is really good for newer players. I know a lot of veteran players are getting close to maxing out their endeavor points. Realistically, on this channel, I help a lot of newer players, and so having something like this that helps newer players get endeavor points faster to become more easily to be competitive in like IC and HSC is definitely nice. For the big change of full Starship access, your options is start a new pure KDF and level them to 65, or you can pay the access thing in the C store for 2,000 Zen and just get that immediately. Get that full access to every single Starship, like assuming that you have access to it, have full access of it. So there is a new KDF Bird of Prey with the recruitment. If you finish it, you get a new Bird of Prey like skin for the Inshallah. The stats of it are meh, and it's down like 2 consoles versus regular tier 6 starships. It's why I didn't really cover it. I mean, it's just a new Bird of Prey. It would have been the same slides as the new Alliance Raider, frankly. It's just what it comes down to. So I didn't think it was noteworthy to show it. You can look at the stat blogs to see the stats if you wish and compare it versus like the Alliance Raider, if you're really curious about it. Obviously, with everyone being able to fly any starship once you get KDF 65 or pay 2,000 Zen in the C store, 1,000 in the first couple of days, it means that Cryptic had the excuse to remove faction consoles from the game, which I called out weeks ago. And I even said in that video, hey, I'm making this video because I'm afraid this is going to happen and it's going to make a lot of people mad. And guess what? I was right. And I made like 2 billion energy credits because I bought up a lot of DPRM consoles and started selling them over the past couple days. Yep. Like, and I made so much bank that I was like, I feel guilty selling so many of these, and so I gave a bunch of them away. I gave a couple of y'all that watch the channel. I gave a couple to Timberwolf as well because I'm like, well, I'm sure Timberwolf can find some other good people that he can give them away, or he can use them himself if he needs energy credits. Whatever. I really don't care. I made my money off of it. I am happy. Basically, what it comes down to now is pretty much the DPRM console is pretty much going to be inaccessible outside of private trades in the near future, because the Atlas already is at like 1 billion energy credits on the exchange right now. Oh, and it's just going to get worse. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. And I'm expecting probably within the next couple of years, like all of your expensive starships are going to be direct purchase from Cryptic only. And it's just kind of going to be the way it is. I'm probably going to make a new video in the future, probably talking about my expectations for how Starship Alliance is going to change and how Starship Alliance is going to work in a factionless world, and how things should be changing, how you should be expecting the game to go forward. Since I was roughly right on most of the things that was going to happen over the next month. Now, the thing that I was wrong about was that there'd be an actual legitimate Tier 6 bird of prey, like Burrell bird of prey with the recruitment event. I was wrong about that. Apparently, they wanted to use the Discovery bird of prey instead of the actual Burrell. Alright, I guess they can do that. It doesn't line up with their cinematic that they made a few months ago for, Year of Klingon in one of the episodes. But hey, that's what they want to do, and that's what they want to do. Anyway, there is some other lore stuff that's coming out in relation to in terms of Greth lore. Maybe in a couple of weeks I will cover some of that stuff. Again, I'm pretty busy and I have other stuff that I'm working on, so yeah, there will be stuff coming out within the next few weeks. Thank you all for watching. And again, like for those of you that paid attention a few weeks ago, you probably made a bunch of money like me as well, because of a lot of players that weren't paying attention and realizing what's happening inside of the game. Feel free to like and subscribe if you like this type of content and you want to get warnings when things are probably going to be changing, because obviously I happen to be mostly right about the last one. If not, then that's totally cool as well. Year of Klingon has been interesting, to say the least. And it's going to get even more interesting as the next months go by. Thank you all for watching, and enjoy the rest of your week.